Are tattoos a sin? The answer will surprise you. What if I told you that something as simple as ink on your skin could have spiritual consequences far beyond what most people ever consider? Think about it. You walk into a tattoo shop, you sit in the chair, the needle starts buzzing. It feels like just another decision, a personal choice, maybe even an expression of faith. But what if this wasn't just about art? What if, hidden within the pages of the Bible, there was a truth so profound, so powerful, that it could completely change the way you see tattoos forever? Because here's what nobody talks about. This isn't just about rules. It's about spiritual impact. Some will tell you God only cares about the heart. Others will say tattoos are absolutely forbidden. But who's right? More importantly, what does God say? This isn't just another opinion-based debate. This is about truth. And the truth is, the Bible speaks on this in ways that will absolutely shock you. Because whether you realize it or not, the mark you choose to place on your body could be linked to something much deeper, something spiritual, something eternal. So, before you make up your mind, before you ever touch a tattoo needle, I challenge you to watch this video until the very end. But if you're here, it's because you truly care about God. Markings have always carried meaning, sometimes deeply spiritual, sometimes cultural, sometimes even rebellious. But where did it all begin? And more importantly, how does God feel about it? Let's go back to the beginning. In the ancient world, body markings were often tied to pagan rituals. In Egypt, slaves and warriors were branded to show ownership. In Canaan, people tattooed themselves with symbols of their gods. In Babylon, markings on the body were used as devotion to deities, a physical declaration of loyalty. And then there was Israel, a nation chosen by God, a nation called to be different, a people set apart. That's why in Leviticus 19:28, God gives a direct command to his people: do not cut your bodies for the dead or put tattoo marks on yourselves. I am the Lord. Seems pretty clear, right? But here's where it gets interesting. This wasn't just about tattoos, it was about spiritual separation. God was drawing a line between his people and the surrounding nations. Nations that worshipped false gods and engaged in ritual bloodletting, scarification, and body marking as a form of idolatry. This raises a massive question. Does this verse apply to tattoos today, or was it only for Israel at that time? Because if tattoos were just about pagan worship back then, what about now? Can a tattoo be neutral, or is it always linked to something deeper? Some argue that today's tattoos have no spiritual meaning, just art, just self-expression. But can we really separate physical actions from spiritual consequences? Jesus himself made something very clear. A good tree cannot bear bad fruit, and a bad tree cannot bear good fruit. Matthew 7:18. In other words, everything we do, everything we put on, everything we say, everything we mark upon ourselves, either bears good fruit or bad fruit. So the real question isn't just, are tattoos forbidden? The real question is, what kind of fruit do they produce? And if God specifically told his people not to mark their bodies back then, should we at least stop and ask, why? Could it be that God sees something in tattoos that we don't? And if tattoos were once connected to idolatry, does that influence still remain today, even in ways we can't see? Think about this. If money, something as neutral as currency, can become an idol when it takes priority over God, then isn't it possible that a tattoo, depending on its meaning, could carry spiritual consequences we don't fully understand? This is exactly why so many believers wrestle with this question, because at the heart of it, it's not about ink. It's about who you belong to, what you represent, and what kind of message you're sending to both the physical and spiritual world. And if that's true, then there's something even bigger we need to discuss, because this isn't just about an Old Testament law. This is about something far deeper, something that goes beyond skin and ink. And once you see it, you won't be able to unsee it. The context of Leviticus 19:28. For many, Leviticus 19:28 is the ultimate argument against tattoos. Do not cut your bodies for the dead or put tattoo marks on yourselves. I am the Lord. Seems straightforward, doesn't it? A clear prohibition. No markings, no tattoos. End of discussion, or is it? Because here's where most people go wrong. They pull a single verse out of context without fully understanding what was happening when God gave this command. See, Leviticus wasn't just a book of random rules. It was a set of laws designed to separate Israel from the nations around them. Nations that engaged in detestable practices, including idol worship, ritualistic blood sacrifices, and self-mutilation in the name of false gods. In other words, the markings God forbade weren't just decorative, they were spiritual declarations of loyalty to pagan deities. In those days, cutting the skin and tattooing symbols weren't just about appearance. These were acts of worship, acts of submission to demonic influences. And let's be honest, if tattoos were purely about personal expression, why would God even mention them? That's where things get interesting, because God doesn't make arbitrary rules. Every command he gives is for a purpose. And in this case, he was drawing a hard line between his people and